socket is the endpoint for sending data to the destination. So in here, in the IP manual, if I go to the manual of the socket, you see that it says socket is an endpoint for communication. So socket creates an endpoint for communication and returns a file descriptor. In a nutshell, if I want to tell you what socket is a combination of an IP address and a port number. So when you are going to send some data to other devices, you should have the IP address of the other device, or where different devices inside the network, they want to communicate with each other or go to internet, each one of them should have a unique IP address that are actually known with that IP address. Now inside a device there are tons of processes or programs that they want to communicate with other processes in the same system, or communicate with other computers or other processes inside other computers in internet or inside our network. So every process should have a unique address too. This address would be unique using a port number. So if there wasn't any port number, just one process at a time could just communicate, could just occupy the IP address, communicate with other devices, and then it should free or release the IP address so that other processes could use. But in this case, with the port numbers, every process would be like a separate endpoint, so that it could have a communication with other devices. Because the port number is 16 bits, 2 to the power of 16 is equal to 65,536. So in theory, we could have 65,000 communications at the same time, because we said we call this endpoint. So again, what we have done using the port numbers is that inside our device we have, it's like we have created 65,000 different devices. We call every one of these devices or every one of these endpoints a socket. So a socket is just a logical endpoint, which is a combination of an IP address and a port number, using which we could expand the communications from 1 to 65,000 in theory. So in here, if we go to the manual page of the socket that you see in here, it says that how we could create a socket. So a socket, again, is the base need or requirement for us to be able to communicate with other devices. Like when we wanted to just go to the internet, we had to have an IP address from the DHCP server. Is the same thing in here. If we want to communicate with other things, we need to have a socket. So right now in my browser that you see, I'm browsing different information in here. The browser in here is the process. It asks a port number and an IP address. So it just gets the IP address of the network interface card, and the operating system would assign a port number to the browser, using which it could send information to other devices. On the other end, the man7.org, acting as the server in here, is listening to a specific port number so that my browser knows how to send this information or where to send this information. Well, the man7.org has an IP address, so the browser would resolve that the domain name of man7 to that specific IP address, and also it would send the HTTP request, the data in here, to the port number 80, because it is the default port number for web servers. But all of these things are going on behind the scenes or in the background. So if we want to implement the communication, we need to know all these concepts. We need to have a socket, and a socket is a combination of an IP address and a port number. So we create it. What it means is that we assign ourselves an IP address and a port number, using which we could start a process.